Brandon Miracle, Daniel
Yes.
Alba.
Yes.
There are many games on the Nintendo Switch family of systems. Many of them are highly regarded and recognized, but a lot of them, because there are so many games, do not get the recognition they deserve. And sometimes these are just as good as the highest and mightiest of the Metacritic games. However, it is time for us to give them their due. And so, on the Blue Sky social media website, I put up a post saying, what are the most disrespected Switch games out there? And we got a lot of different replies with a lot of different games in there. And what do you think was the most common game that was mentioned?
The most common game mentioned was definitely Little Town Hero.
Yeah, it's an unsung gem. There are hundreds, actually. Daniel, do you have any idea what the most commonly underrated Switch game was?
I think the one that I definitely saw a lot, because I was kind of combing through that thread as well. One of them was definitely Paper Mario: The Origami King.
That was the top one. That was the one that people said the most commonly.
Awesome. I win top prize. Thank you, John.
There you go. Points all around for Daniel.
I did not play that game right away. That's a game that I kind of waited around for to see what people's reactions were going to be, because unfortunately that entire property's reputation had been stained by a couple of the titles that came before it. I was still Nintendo trying to figure out what is Paper Mario anymore, because they certainly didn't seem to know for a good long time. And I actually quite enjoyed it. I really, once I stopped looking at it as like, what did Nintendo try to do to make Paper Mario relevant again, and just saw it as its own game by itself and separated from, you know, the ones that we all love, the original on N64 and Thousand Year Door, then I started to really enjoy that game a lot more.
Yeah. I kept saying the word underrated earlier. That's not really what we're looking at. It's undeserved reputation, which I guess is a separate thing. And Origami King is so often bundled with Color Splash and Sticker Star. But honestly, it pushes Paper Mario forward in many ways in terms of like the progression and world design. It's more of an adventure than it's ever really been. The scope is huge. You get some levels which just dwarf anything Paper Mario's ever done before. You even get like almost like an open ocean in one of the chapters, kind of like Wind Waker. You can just sail around. Like the scope is really impressive in Origami King.
Yeah, it going back to Thousand Year Door after the fact kind of highlights what Origami King does better to me. And world design, I think, is very near the top of the list of things. Like, even some of the locales are just more fun and more interesting. I forget the name of the location, but it's up in the sky, the spa. Just what a goofy idea with like the angel toads and the whole thing with Bowser Jr. and
it's really good. And
Kamek. It's just a lot of fun. Just it's putting Mario in situations with characters you love, it's celebrating those characters and doing fun things with them.
Yeah. Is there any surprise that most people think this is like the most hard done by Switch game? Like the vast majority of people said this game does not deserve its reputation. Is that any surprise?
That's definitely surprising to me because, well, I guess it just falls in line with a lot of people just already determined like this isn't going to be anywhere near the Paper Mario that I want, and so they just kind of shoved it aside. They're like, oh, it's going to be just Color Splash 2, or God forbid another Sticker Star. When I think a lot of people that actually gave it a chance, like they were like, oh no, this is actually a really good game in its own bubble. Like if you just kind of stop trying to compare it to everything before it and just kind of look at it as just as Paper Mario: The Origami King, because there's a lot there that I think it does fantastically. I feel like the writing in these games get better and better in Paper Mario, even more so than like in Color Splash, and even Sticker Star had some good writing, but it evolved since then, and I think it just expanded since that point. And as you were saying with exploration, I still distinctly remember just carting around on that little boot in the desert. Like that was fun, like just moving around. Like that really showed me like how expansive a Paper Mario game in the modern era could be. And it's just like, yeah, and the sailing. It was just they played with a lot more ideas than I think people give it credit for.
I want to speak to the battle system too. I think the ring system is actually really cool. I know a lot of people struggle with the puzzle element of that. I was not one of those people myself. So just spinning the rings, figuring out the alignments, I found that to be a really enjoyable way to engage with the game's battle system. It's so much faster than Color Splash. It's still similar to Sticker Star and Color Splash and how the attacks play out, but now you have equipable gear. They aren't expended after one use like the stickers and the cards were in Color Splash. There's some incentive to actually use your items and keep using them, which has the effect of making coins a little bit more valuable, making battles a little more fun. You get the what was it, confetti?
Yeah, the confetti.
Yeah.
Which you actually need to fill out the world. I just felt like battling was a lot more interesting than the prior two games. And especially with the boss battles. And I predicted this before the game revealed this, but it puts Mario on the outside and the boss in the center instead. And then you have to navigate your way to the boss, find their weaknesses, which are a lot more intuitive than they were in the previous two games where you just kind of picked a thing and hoped it was the right one.
Right.
It's just more interesting.
Yeah. I honestly wasn't that shocked. I thought this game had more detractors than it did those who like it. But I think if enough time has passed that people can say they like it without fear of backlash. But there's quite a lot of games in here, many of pretty high caliber. And I guess the second most mentioned one was just kind of Pokemon in general. The most mentioned game was Sword and Shield. But there's also a lot of Violet and Scarlet in there. There's some Let's Go in there. There's some Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl. Basically all of them are mentioned, but Sword and Shield came out on top with Scarlet and Violet around the same. Maybe just a few less people saying that one. Is that any surprise?
I was going to say, it's kind of hard to say, because compared to Origami King, the utter vitriol on the internet for Sword and Shield was just so intense.
So, like, reflecting on that now, is Sword and Shield that bad?
I don't think so.
I liked
personally.
it when it came out.
Technically, like Scarlet and Violet obviously have major issues, technically. Sword and Shield, the wild area is pretty ugly. Otherwise, though, I thought like most of the towns were quite attractive. The battle system, like the models look quite nice. Like this game was never that bad, technically.
I think, honestly, if I look back, I might have been... Well, this is probably because I spent like many hours with Sword and Shield, but I think I enjoy that game more so than Scarlet and Violet in certain ways. It does some things better, I think, than what Scarlet and Violet has done. Of course, like you have Sword and Shield had the wild area, and then when you had the DLC with like the Isle of Armor, for example, and the Crown Tundra, that was pretty much just Game Freak laying the groundwork for what was going to become the entirety of Scarlet and Violet. So it does get some credit for that as well. But I don't know. People just really it's so hard to please all the Pokemon fans because they're never ever going to all be pleased when you have like the whole Pokedex. The thing is like this series has 1,000 Pokemon now, and even at Sword and Shield there's like we're running up to 800 and something, and you can't realistically code every single one in there. Like the series itself is getting too big for itself, honestly, and now it's hurting development because like people want all these Pokemon. We have to roll them out with the DLC,
and their scope is not shrinking. Instead of going like let's just go from town to town, they're going what if it's just open world? Like they're not really like solving their tech issues. They're just sort of making them bigger. But yeah, you can't fault Pokemon for being unambitious. Scarlet and Violet are very ambitious games. And that's what a lot of people are saying. They're saying they're the most fun. They do a lot of things they don't get credit for, but obviously no one is shunning away its technical shortcomings.
I think, and I don't know where you two fall on this, but back when all of the controversy around Sword and Shield was so big, from my perspective, people were taking their frustrations about the Pokedex and using that to confirmation bias a bunch of other problems that they had with the game.
Yeah.
I bet you if the Pokedex wasn't a problem, you wouldn't be hearing a lot of the stuff that people said back then.
But it was also like the big console debut. Like we had Let's Go before that, but this was Pokemon's big HD debut. And it was compared a lot to like Breath of the Wild, and it clearly didn't compare favorably to that visually. That was another thing. But yeah, you're right. The Dex is really what just knocked it over. After that, people just like, oh, look at this tree. it was everything after that.
When I saw the tree screenshot, I was like, oh, this is that kind of stupid argument, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny because like I guess also there was expectations because I think Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee is like the best looking Pokemon game on the Switch.
You're right, it is.
Like you go into any forest and the lighting it's gorgeous, but that's because it's so much more smaller and focused. It's not trying to be the massive world that it is. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons, anyways. We visited Kanto so many times at this point, but there's just a lot about Sword and Shield that I enjoy better. That I feel like it's still that kind of traditional Pokemon story. Like it has the illusion that you can go anywhere, and people are upset that you can't actually explore this entire main city in all its little nooks and crannies the way you can for like Mesagoza in Scarlet Violet, like the main city. But I mean, there's like I think it's a whole bunch of factors. I think there's more characters in Scarlet and Violet that people are very fond of and remember more than people in Sword and Shield and in Scarlet and Violet, because I don't really hear anyone talking about the characters of Scarlet and Violet, like say Nessa or Leon or Marnie or people from Sword and Shield as well. Like they're very memorable characters, but the story is a different issue. I don't like the story.
No.
In Sword and Shield.
I'm surprised not many people mentioned new Pokemon Snap, and I guess because it doesn't really have an undeserved reputation as much as it doesn't really have much of a reputation. I think those who played it love it, but it's not the sort of game that everyone's just always talking about. I think it deserves more of a reputation, but no one's really like, oh, that game sucks. Most people who played it like it or love it. That's in like a weird different realm, I think.
I just from my own personal experience, I really liked what I played of New Pokemon Snap. What I found is that in those opening hours, it just kind of lulled me to sleep a few times. Not in a bad way, like it was just very comforting.
Yeah,
and I think it happened one too many times, and I ended up never going back to it.
you just fell asleep and never woke up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's keep moving on though. Another game, and this is one that has the discourse for this game never ends. It's Xenoblade Chronicles 2. When it came out, it was heralded as like one of the best RPGs ever made, and then as time went on, people kept posting scenes from the game on Twitter, and then every few months it trends. People going, "Oh, this game is the worst." But obviously there are a lot of Xenoblade 2 fans out there, and a lot of people mentioned it here, saying like, yes, it does have tropes that they're not always comfortable with. This isn't the kind of game you want to play when your mum walks into the room at all times. However, there's still a great story, amazing music, incredible world. Xenoblade 2 absolutely, I think, It definitely deserves to stand among the other Xenoblade games. It's not the black sheep of the trilogy. It's just got a few odd little quirks about it.
This is how I got into the Xenoblade series. Officially got into it. I played the first game on Wii beforehand, but I kind of didn't stick with it. It was like it was the characters and the story that kind of helped me settle into Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I feel like that's the term that probably is the case for a lot of people when they see some of the characters in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I heard a lot of people saying how great it was at launch. And within the month, I was like, I want to download this too, because it had sold like 1 million within the first month. And so I'm just like, I'm missing out on something special here. So I wanted to see it for myself. And yeah, I've kind of accepted the fact that it's going to have these very classic anime, very Japanese tropes in it. But people just blow that up out of proportion to the point where they start to not see like the real depth that this story has, like the characters as well, like the really great characters all around. Some of my favorite characters in the Xenoblade Chronicles are in too. And yeah, I think one of the other things is like the battle system can be kind of complicated, and then there's like an in-game gotcha system. That was one of the issues that I had too. Like when you get the blades, not everybody has the same experience, which is like I guess a good and bad
it's kind
thing.
of a good thing, yeah.
But also, I'm just like, oh, I wish I had that blade on my team, or I wish I knew more about that character, because you get like side quests and stories of that blade as you go through the game. But by the time you're at the end, you might not have everybody. You most likely won't have everybody. So it's kind of leaves me feeling like I missed some of the experience going all the way through that I could have done, but I was forced out of it because I'm not lucky at gacha.
I think, excuse me, I think the problems that I ended up having with Xenoblade 2 aren't so much like the anime tropes and that kind of stuff. Even though I'm admittedly not generally a fan of that kind of thing anyway, it didn't really bother me so much playing through Xenoblade 2. I think my main issues playing through were definitely just the battle system being a little complicated. It doesn't explain itself very well.
The tutorials are bad, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the affinity charts drove me insane. I hated getting walled off in the plot because I didn't have enough points in something, and I just didn't quite understand it. So, like, when I first got to those areas where I couldn't proceed, I didn't know what I was doing wrong. And I had a hard time kind of figuring it out.
So when you like field skills to get past like a certain part of the environment.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm happy that didn't come back.
Yeah, I was not a fan of that. Those are the elements that definitely like come from the Xenoblade wants to be an MMO as a single player game kind of perspective, which I respect. I think that's a cool idea. I think those elements are just taking it a step too far, and I'm glad that they dialed it back for 3.
Yeah.
But overall, I think Xenoblade 2 does have a great story. It's got excellent music. When you look past some of the character designs, they are great.
There's some great characters in there. The actual personalities are really good. Like, if you've just seen like a blushy, crushy scene posted out of context, you're going to get a bad impression. But there are actually some really great developments in here, and you shouldn't miss out on this game just from seeing a few bad clips.
I also want to defend Rex a little bit.
Sure.
I feel like a lot of the flack Rex gets is because of the unfortunate happenings with the English dub of that game, which are at no fault of the actors. You know, it's just they didn't get the context they needed to do their best.
Does anybody in live audience remember the Salvage's Code? Like, what were the rules?
Oh boy, I know it rhymed and I cringed.
Yeah,
but I can't remember the exact word. Poor Rex. Like, I know he had the whole voice actor thing. People knock on his design as well, which I guess, I mean, the Salvager's outfit, I mean, you can see where the design makes sense from a character perspective, but going on this journey, I guess it didn't really fit the theme of everything that he was doing. But yeah, I think the voice acting was like, they literally went from start to finish, like from the very first point to the very end. So by the time you get towards like the latter half, they kind of ease into their roles a lot better for most of these characters anyways.
And I think Rex's character arc is actually also fairly interesting. He runs a little like basic shonen protagonist, but you know, I like that.
Well, let's move on to the next game, which I think Daniel's going to have a lot to say about. So, one game that was mentioned a lot is Fire Emblem Engage. Obviously, Three Houses was incredibly popular in the Switch era, and I think this was probably a lot of people's second Fire Emblem game, Engage. And it wasn't what they were looking for. However, there are a lot of people that do love this game.
I think that is the problem, is that this was a lot of people's second Fire Emblem game. What a lot of people don't understand is that the other pivotal game was Fire Emblem Awakening, that pretty much saved the series. But that game took a lot of the elements that came before it and what made Fire Emblem what it was, like with the different children in the timeline, the world map. A lot of stuff went into making this like the amalgamation of everything Fire Emblem was beforehand. So that got a lot of people into the series, and when other games came out after it, it's like, oh yeah, I'm familiar with this because I played Awakening. But then you have a game like Three Houses, which is that game, for those people that don't know, that is in fact the weird black sheep of the series. There's no other Fire Emblem game that's like that, because heavy emphasis on like social aspects is what really made that game stand apart. Like being able to pretty much know your entire cast from the start of the game and just kind of bond with those characters with your specific class from start to finish. And obviously the different routes, which is something that they took from Fates, but they instead put it in one game instead. And a lot of people really were into that. They gravitated towards that, and they were really just a big fan of that format. The problem is that I think these two games were kind of being made around the same time as each other, and they were meant to be differently, as far apart different as they could be. There are some aspects that are the same, but when you get to Engage, it's like they took much of what made Garreg Mach Monastery what it was, and they just condensed it into the Somnial. And so you took away a lot of those social aspects, and unfortunately, that's people that were looking for Three Houses 2 didn't get that with Engage. There's so many aspects of that people just kind of took at first glance and said like, oh, this isn't as good as the last game, when in fact it calls back way more to like the Game Boy Advance era and before that. It has a lot of that feeling to it. One of the examples being like your support ranks. Like they're very short, they're very condensed, they're not as like in depth, and they're very silly. The whole game, it knows how anime it is. Just watch the intro. This game knows what its personality is, and it runs with it the entire way through. And people just had an issue with that for being like very colorful character designs, very like outgoing, crazy personalities. Your main character is like the straight man in a circus of clowns, and it's just so funny to see how they react with everybody in this world. But yeah, just things like that. People just didn't really vibe with it. But everyone can agree that the battle system is like the best it's ever been. Like the fighting is all across the board. People have said that that's like the best that the series has had. But did you guys both play this game all the way through?
I didn't play it all the way through. I played a bit and I enjoyed it. But I think, kind of coming from where you're going from, it seems like people just didn't like it because it wasn't Three Houses 2. Like it's a lot of fun. The story wasn't. I didn't find it that gripping, but I found it fun though. Like it wasn't like a big epic for me. It was just kind of like more, just sort of going along with it, and that was fun. But it was the combat that really pulled me in. So I can't really fault it that much. It does what it sets out to do very well. It doesn't really try to make an impression that it's something more than that.
I also didn't play it all the way through, but like you both, I did find the battle system to be really enjoyable.
Yeah.
I have a little bit more experience with classic Fire Emblem thanks to playing through FE7 with Daniel. Yeah. And I also, Fire Emblem Awakening was like the first time I played through a full Fire Emblem. So I also had a little bit of a peer into the past as well. Three Houses is still my favorite game, but there was still a lot about Engage I enjoyed. I think I agree with you, John, where I didn't find the story super gripping. I hate when a game or a story introduces you to characters and then a tragedy takes place and the tragedy is not earned and there's not enough build up and then I'm sitting through this scene that I just don't care about. It kind of lost me there. I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about, but like maybe that fixes itself later. I don't know. It's just it didn't do it for me. But I would like to go back and play through the rest of it at some point because I do crave some Fire Emblem action, and it's a good game for that.
Just to ride the Fire Emblem tails a little bit, both Fire Emblem Warriors and Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity were mentioned. Not that much, but they were mentioned. And I remember that Fire Emblem Warriors is one of Daniel's most played Switch games. So, like, I think he's one of those guys too, where, like, clearly that game wasn't delivering in spades for, like, long-term Fire Emblem fan service, but it was still a good game.
I enjoyed that for what it was. The main gripe, obviously, is that it only took characters from, like, a few games, and then some guest characters, like Lyn and Celica, were from other titles, but that was it.
Yeah.
That was pretty much my first real taste in a Warriors in a Muso game. So I think that's what drove me to play it as much as I could, because I just wanted to, like, the addiction of getting boxes checked and getting things done and seeing the map fill out with all the little check marks was something that I was just really a fan of. And there was a lot of fan service too, of course, with different characters.
Yeah.
Terrible unit variety, a lot of clones of characters, unfortunately. But I didn't know better because I wasn't really like accustomed to what a Muso game is supposed to be per se. But they really fixed that with Three Hopes that came out afterwards, which is the sequel to Three Houses, the sequel that nobody really played, it feels like.
Yeah, that's less of like an undeserved reputation, as it doesn't really have a reputation. Not many people like seem to talk about that game.
cycle, I guess.
Yeah.
Alternate, like Age of Calamity, a different
Yeah,
timeline.
Age of Calamity is an interesting one too, because it does have quite a poor reputation. I don't like the twist. I enjoyed most of the game. I didn't like the end twist very much. But it does a great job of just converting Breath of the Wild into a Muso. All I can really fault it for is the performance, because otherwise it's like a beautiful take on Breath of the Wild with just hundreds of enemies everywhere. I enjoyed my time with it, but it wasn't quite on the caliber of the first game, though.
For me, I would take Age of Calamity any day over the previous Hyrule Warriors.
Okay.
But that's just because for me, it just feels more cohesive. I like, all of the big Zelda celebration, everything that happens in the original Hyrule Warriors. What I don't like is the art direction. It doesn't feel very cohesive. It just feels a little generic at times, just with the way light casts on stuff, kind of flat.
The character
But-
designs are cool, though.
They are. No, I'm not going to fault it for that. But Age of Calamity just trying to hone in on one aspect of Zelda, I think makes it a more enjoyable experience for me,
Yeah.
while also giving more attention to characters that didn't get enough attention in the game they came from.
Yeah. But let's go back to some of the big stuff, though. So, a very commonly mentioned game, and a similar game wasn't far behind of it, but Mario Tennis Aces was mentioned a lot. And this is something that I talk about quite a bit. I think Aces is, like, probably my favorite Mario sports game. And if you were to just go by, like, what people say on Twitter, you would think it was the worst one. Usually it's just sort of compared to Power Tennis, which is a great game. But I think Aces, what it does better than Power Tennis is it just gives you endless variety in the core gameplay. Like, it's lacking in side modes. Has an adventure mode, which is pretty good. That has some of the flavor I think people are looking for. But if you were to just play it online, I think its core mechanics can carry you for pretty much forever. Because every game feels different. There's just constant strategy. Who you're playing against changes it up as well. This is like one of my favorite Switch games. I think it absolutely does not deserve any of its reputation.
I know how passionate you are about this game, John. I think probably, I guess before this, my most played Mario sports or any side Mario game, sports game, would probably be Power Tennis.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed how that one worked, and I guess that kind of is the building blocks of this because it does give you some more freedom and of how to use and how to work the flow of a match, because you have your power hits, your defensive hits, which is essentially what you have in Aces, but it's like in a meter instead. And I slowly started to realize like how high the skill ceiling can be in a game like this, because it can be when we're in a rally with someone that really knows what they're doing, that gets intense. Like that's really some of the most like tense moments I've had playing any kind of sports game with a Mario sports game. And I know you've definitely been delving into that, or you've delved into that for very much a long time, ever since that game released.
Not compared to some people. I'm like a couple of 100 hours. You get like if you lose a game really badly, like you check their playtime, some of them are like 3,000 hours, and you can tell by
crazy.
how well they play.
That is insane.
I think Aces has the best gameplay in the series by far. I don't even think it's a contest. That game is just so much fun to play in a competitive setting. That I don't get that as much from like Power Tennis. Power Tennis is a little more party,
Yeah,
which
for
is
sure.
also fun.
Yeah.
But Aces Aces is where you go when you're ready to ascend to the next level.
Isn't it wild though that this game is just treated as a bad game though? Like it's so good. Is it just people who haven't played it thinking this, or
I
do wonder
remember
yeah,
the
what-
reputation for the game when it first came out, and I remember a lot of it being because of the content rollout.
sure?
Like characters were
lack
slowly being added; they weren't there right away. There was also like side modes and cosmetics that you would get over time, like via events. Am I right in that?
There were events, yeah. That you can get like different costumes for some of the characters, like different hats for Chain Chomp.
It's a similar frustration I heard about the most recent Strikers Battle League.
Yeah.
Where there just wasn't enough content at launch, and they drip fed it out for a little while. I think both of these games in their complete state are much better and should be treated that way.
Yeah, we got a comment from Shellshock Prime in chat saying Battle League was not good. It's complicated because I feel like Battle League, its core is quite good, but there's just not enough to sort of keep you playing. I feel like Aces, even in its non-complete state, I felt like you could just keep playing that forever. Battle League, I think you kind of feel like you see it all after a while, and some kind of variety would have gone a long way. But the core mechanics aren't bad. But you do mention Super Rush, Golf Super Rush, and that was also a very commonly stated game for being undeserved for its reputation. A lot of people do seem to like Super Rush.
I feel like I live on a different planet when I talk about Super Rush. I like Super Rush a lot. It's my favorite Mario Golf game. It's very close to Toadstool Tour, though. I also love Toadstool Tour.
That was a very good one, yeah. The 3DS one was good as well.
The thing about Super Rush that I like more is the changes to the core golf gameplay. The way that you can guide the ball during the meter in my opinion, increases the skill ceiling of that game. You have a lot more control over where the ball can go, and that can make matches a lot tighter. I don't like any of the free roaming, running, or any of that stuff in Super Rush.
It got old.
Like for me, it's all about the core golf. So like when I play with friends, we just do simultaneous stroke play. We just all play at the same time. We hang out, we talk, we have a good time, and 18 holes go by, and we'll see who did the best. We congratulate each other when we have a good shot or a good chip in. Oh, sorry. I just find it to be a really enjoyable experience. And I don't think people appreciate it enough for just the core gameplay.
This one didn't land as hotly with me. And I think maybe I do need to just ditch the running mechanics and just play core golf like you do. Because the thing
just wastes your time.
The thing I enjoy most about this game is actually the battle stadium bit, where you have like holes you have to win against everybody else. I think that's a brilliant mode. But I always found the core golf a little bit, it got kind of stale fast. And I wonder if I was just to play like a regular golf game, but that would fix that.
Yeah, get some buddies together, just do some simultaneous stroke play, and I think you'll have a great time.
Just to go back, because I didn't get to say anything for Battle League, I got an opportunity a couple months ago to do a player in person, where you actually play as one person the entire time on that team. And that was a much more exciting experience than the core gameplay itself.
It's
and
an 8-player
wish
game,
that was
right?
something.
But you never get the opportunity to play it that way.
We were all like, wow, if only Nintendo lets you do this like online.
Yeah.
The way that it feels like it was meant to be played. I think that would have that game would have a lot more legs to it. Because the core itself is perfectly fine. It's playable. It's awesome. There's characters on there that I forgot were added, like Shy Guy. And I think Daisy was added afterwards.
Yeah, Daisy was added.
And yeah, it's just a problem of Nintendo just releasing these games and not having all the content on release. And people have issues with that. Like it does feel like it's barren, and they try to balance it between like they can't all be Splatoon where it carries it for a very long time, but because those games feel complete as they are, they just keep adding on top of it.
Yeah.
But for Mario sports games, it's just a little bit trickier to find that balance, because I guess people have expectations for titles that came before it, like Power Tennis, for example.
I implore you both to just scroll through that thread and find one game each to talk about. Like whatever grabs your attention. Doesn't have to be the most frequently talked about one. But just to keep it on the sports front for a second, Switch Sports is mentioned in there. And this game is usually compared to Resort, where it lacks the sports. There's absolutely less variety within Switch Sports. However, I love this game, and I've played it for like 60 hours. I think that's because it just incentivizes you to play online. That's the main draw. Whenever you turn the game on, online is the first option. To get cosmetics, you've got to play online. And clearly that is the point of this game. It's about playing bowling with 16 other people. It's about playing golf simultaneously with everybody else. You can play it offline, but I think that's not really what they designed it around. And if you commit to what they designed it around, being online play, there's so much fun to be had. I love playing golf with everybody else, taking our turns at the same time. I love Chumbara. I think that's a ton of fun online. I love just bowling. I love even the football. I found quite fun. This is just a really good game that doesn't deserve to be lumped down with the lesser Switch games.
Don't give up on Switch Sports. They're still adding updates. They added basketball. Who knows what else they'll add?
And it's pretty fun.
I was a big Switch Sports defender. I was so excited when that game got announced because Wii Sports Resort's one of my all-time favorite motion control party games. It doesn't hit the highs of Wii Sports Resort, but what's there is really dang good.
Yeah.
Yeah, like with Resort, once you kind of exhausted the single-player stuff, it becomes a local party game. And with like Switch Sports, that party never has to end. You can just play that for forever. You don't need friends around. So they kind of serve two different purposes, while Resort is higher in some, for sure.
You can be a squirrel in Switch Sports Resort. Or Switch
shark.
Sports Resort.
Your head could be a candy pop and lollipop, and you can just be who you want.
Have you guys had a chance to find a title?
I have one.
Okay.
This is a game I loved when it came out. I still love playing today whenever I get the chance to. And I really hope one day it gets a second chance, and that's ARMS. I don't think ARMS has like a hugely bad reputation, but it doesn't have the greatest reputation.
Yeah, it's kind of treated as a joke sometimes. Do you think that because people kind of expected it to be the next Splatoon, that damaged its reputation?
That's a part of it, yeah, because you definitely see that in the lore. They've built an expansive universe for ARMS. There was going to be a graphic novel that ended up getting canceled, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just a shame what happened there. People didn't latch onto it the way they did.
No. But it still sold well though. Like it sold over 3 million. That's more than any Xenoblade game. That's more than most Switch games. I most wish they could sell 3 million.
Yeah, it's but still, I still don't see the love and affection for it.
Yeah.
That I do for something like Xenoblade. I feel like I see way more Xenoblade fans than I do ARMS fans, despite the difference in sales.
Yeah.
ARMS is another game that did the drip feed content strategy, and I'm noticing a pattern here.
Yeah.
And I remember that being a little frustrating at launch, but whenever they did add a new character, I always hopped back in, tried them out. I remember, fighting Max Brass at the end of the arcade mode and just wishing he was playable, and then he was, and I was like, yeah! They even added modes, I love, the headlock versus mode where you all fight for the helmet with all the extra arms on it. I really love that. It's great fun in 2v2. There's a whole different strategy there where you are astral chained to another person. I think there's just a lot more to that game, and people just don't give it enough credit.
It's really different. There's nothing like ARMS. Most games that come out, you can compare it to something else, whereas this is just a completely new fighter. And the online is so good. If you just jump in, you get in that sort of dancing around lobby where you can sort of get into different games, and it's just so seamless and fun. I played a lot of ranked when this came out. Not so much lately, but every now and then it comes up in our EP squads, and it's just nice. It's just nice to play some ARMS.
I also think it's a better game personally on sticks and buttons versus motion controls. I know they build it as a motion control game, and it can be fun that way, but it's just a lot tighter on controller, I think.
Yeah.
I'm glad you have that option. Imagine if they just didn't have the option for buttons. How much would this reputation have been tarnished as well by just only having motion controls? Because it sounds like a very Nintendo thing that they would just force you to do motion because that's the actual motions that the characters are doing. But I'm glad they have the option to do so.
I love Lola Pop. I think that's one of the coolest designs of this generation. I don't go towards clowns very often, but that's a nice clown.
They were really pulling for Lollipop when there was discussion of an ARMS character being in Smash Brothers. That was a really high contender among fans.
Yeah.
But we got Min Min.
Yeah. But Daniel, have you got a game for us?
I don't know if I've seen it particularly too often in this list, but one that I always think about is Mario plus Rabbids.
Sure.
A lot of people, it's the most crazy, insane game that I think the concept put together is putting Rabbids and Mario, the Mushroom Kingdom, together in one game. But I probably just because I'm a tactics fan, but I thought that I found that to be a lot more enjoyable than in execution as I played it, and even Sparks of Hope kind of just overall improved upon it as they went on. Like
It's great.
the DLC might have been a little bit underwhelming for a game that was going to bring back Rayman, because we didn't actually have like the Mario characters interacting with Rayman. But I mean, the core of it is actually really well done. I love what they did with Sparks of Hope. They gave you a lot more freedom to move around. Just leveling up your characters, being aware of your spacing and everything. I wasn't really I've never tried anything that was the type of XCOM style of game, but that really introduced me into it. And I guess some people kind of hand wave it because it is Rabbids, but Ubisoft put a lot of effort and love into that. Like the animations of characters are fantastic in that game. It was the most personality I've seen in Mario characters in a long time, and even since then.
I think Sparks of Hope is more hard done by than the first one. 'Cause in many ways, it's better. The scope, the imagination is so much better. The combat, I'd say, is better.
Yeah.
But you get a lot of people just hand-waving it. And I think it's just because it was too recent, maybe. I mean, this probably should have been like a one-per-generation game, and people just weren't up for giving it a go.
I couldn't agree more. I like the original Mario and Rabbids. I loved Sparks of Hope.
So good, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a massive leap over the first game in a ton of ways. You may have lost Yoshi for some reason, but even like the original characters, I forget there's one Rabbid, the green-haired one. Do you remember her name?
I do.
I'm failing at my brain, but anyway, I really liked her. I really liked where the story goes in that game, especially Edge. Thank you. I found a lot of the map designs for the battles to be way more interesting than the first one. A lot of like vertical layering in some of them, so like you go in way deeper. You have to think a lot more strategically about where you go and when. And I got really invested in the gameplay in Sparks of Hope, especially.
Yeah. I hope that these go down as like really memorable, weird, wacky games. Because you always see like Nintendo too conservative in this era. They don't do fun stuff. But then you got like Mario with a gun with the Rabbids. Like how are you not embracing that? There were a few other games in here, like Labo was mentioned, Labo VR and Labo Vehicle Kit, which the software for those were genuinely good. And I think they kind of captured that wacky Nintendo era that people are looking for. One game that I only saw like once or twice in there that I was hoping people would mention was Cadence of Hyrule. We got an indie Zelda game that's entirely rhythm-based. It's got some complete bangers in there. It has like proper dungeons and items. Like this, people are missing out on what is pretty much a Zelda game, like just a legit one. I don't know why. It's really good.
It's really fascinating whenever you see these games that are done not by the main company, but somebody else is taking the reins of it. Pokemon Morale Sessions is another one with Fire Emblem.
That was mentioned a bunch too. Yeah.
Yeah, that one with like obviously Mario being handled by Ubisoft, and then Zelda with the indie titles. That one I played through the whole thing. I thought that was fantastic. And yeah, for some reason I guess people just don't really. I guess because these games, they take the idea and they lean in a different direction that I guess a lot of the fans just aren't really expecting or were wanting, and so they kind of like push it aside, like, oh, they're just doing their own thing. When in fact, the more people should give these games a chance, because Cadence of Hyrule was like the first of its kind of gameplay I played as well, where it's just all rhythm based, and I thought it was fascinating. Very amazing music too. Very catchy remixes throughout the whole game.
We probably could do this forever, right? There's a lot of really great Switch games that aren't given the reputation they deserve. Like Astral Chain is another one. That's such a good game that just isn't talked about much. But I think when it comes to it, we're in this social era. Sometimes word of mouth spreads, and if one person or a prominent person didn't love something, that becomes the opinion of many others. And so it's kind of hard for many games to escape that. And so some games that either were always good or became good later, just they never get that redemption. And I hope that one game that we talked about today gets a second chance from someone, because every game we've talked about is good.
It's also worth mentioning that a lot of the games we talked about today they don't like fit to the most general mold.
Sure.
Like a lot of them are very unique, and the more unique you get, the less broad appeal you're going to have, and I think that's just natural.
Yeah.
I think folks like us are typically looking for the more strange kind of gameplay experiences, and so we gravitate to stuff like this. But I think in a lot of cases it's understandable why maybe they don't catch on.
Yeah, I'm really happy that the Switch era has so many cases like this where games kind of branch out from their usual style and did something different. And so that, yeah, we can appreciate the originals as well as something that took a different take on the Switch, because there's just so many games on the Switch. So
Yeah.
there's something out there for everyone, but it's really nice that people have that option to try something new if they're feeling a little adventurous.
Absolutely. Very well said. But I think we should probably cut it there for now. But continue this conversation in the comments, because it really is endless. We're just talking about the Nintendo games. And third-party wise, it's going to be a sprawling amount as well. So yeah, just keep talking about it. Let us know what you think. And I guess that's it for now. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you want to join that little box in the corner, the live audience box, you can by supporting us over on Patreon in the live audience tier. But until then, look at Daniel Alba and say goodbye.
Till we meet again. You're making me nervous.
I'm just making eye contact with you right now.
Y'all look so handsome today.
Bye, everybody.